I sat at the edge of the bed, still in the navy dress I'd picked out 3 weeks ago, holding onto the hope that maybe, just maybe, he'd remember this time. 11 years of marriage, and for the 5th year in a row, my husband had forgotten our anniversary. No text, no flowers, not even a glance that said, "Oh, today means something." He came home late again, tossed his keys on the counter like he always did, and asked what was for dinner. Dinner? I laughed under my breath and swallowed the lump in my throat. Leftovers, I said, turning away before the sting in my eyes could betray my calm. I ate alone that night, at the table meant for two, tracing my finger over the lace runner I'd saved from our wedding reception. I wasn't asking for much, just to be seen, to be remembered, to be loved out loud. But someone did remember. At 9:14 p.m., the doorbell rang. Confused, I opened it and froze. It was Adam, his older brother, the one with the kind eyes, the one who always made me feel like someone worth listening to. In his hands was a bouquet of Casablanca lilies and tiny white daisies, the same flowers I had in my hair on our wedding day. He said nothing at first, just looked at me for a long second like he was trying to hold my brokenness together with his stare. I saw the date on the calendar. He finally said, "And I remembered the look on your face when you walked down the aisle. I've never forgotten it." I felt my breath catch, heart pounding from the unexpected warmth his presence brought. "I shouldn't be here," he added, almost to himself, but then he stepped closer, lowering his voice like the truth was something delicate. "But if I had met you first, you'd never know what it feels like to be forgotten." Something in me cracked open, quietly. No screaming, no anger, just silence, laced with a heartbeat that suddenly remembered how to feel wanted. We stood there for a long moment, the space between us filled with everything we couldn't say. But in his eyes I saw it all, the regret, the longing, and a tenderness I hadn't felt in years. "I just wanted you to have a reason to smile today," he whispered, handing me the flowers. "Even if it's not the one you expected it from." And then he turned, walked back to his car, and left me standing in the doorway, clutching the only reminder of my wedding day that still made my heart feel alive. But that night changed everything, because for the first time in a long time, someone saw me, not as a wife, not as a woman waiting at a table for two, but as me. And that's when the real story began. I placed the bouquet gently on the kitchen counter and stared at it like it held the answers to questions I hadn't dared to ask out loud. The smell of lilies filled the air, familiar, soft, haunting. I ran my fingers along the petals, remembering how I'd chosen them on purpose for our wedding, because they meant devotion. I guess I'd been the only one devoted. My husband was already asleep on the couch, TV remote still in hand, shoes on, tie half undone, his back rising and falling in rhythmic, oblivious peace. I stood there in the doorway for a while, watching him, waiting for something in me to stir, but nothing did. Not even anger, just quiet resignation. The kind that comes when you've cried all the tears and dried them before anyone ever noticed. I tiptoed upstairs, slipped out of my dress, and pulled on a plain cotton tee. Then I laid down and stared at the ceiling, clutching a single daisy from the bouquet. Adam's words kept replaying in my mind like a soft echo I couldn't turn off. "If I'd met you first," what did he mean by that? And why did my heart flutter when he said it? The next morning, there was a note in the mailbox. No name on the envelope, just my name written in Adam's handwriting. His letters always neat, always careful. I opened it with shaking hands. "I know I crossed a line. I won't do it again." But I meant every word. "If you ever want to talk, not as my brother's wife, but just as you, I'm here. A." I clutched the note against my chest, heart pounding like it knew something my mind didn't want to admit. Because for the first time in years, I felt more alive from a note in a mailbox than I ever did sharing a bed with my husband. Later that week, I found myself standing in line at the grocery store, still turning his words over like they were some kind of secret magic spell. And then I looked up, and there he was again. Adam, standing 2 lanes over, scanning the shelves like he hadn't just broken something open inside me. He didn't see me at first, but when our eyes met, everything around us faded. He didn't smile, he didn't need to. There was something in his eyes that said, "I see you." Something in mine that whispered, "I'm tired of not being seen." And just like that, I knew something had shifted. Because sometimes, the heart remembers who made it feel safe, even if the world tells you that person shouldn't be holding it. I didn't mean to follow him. I told myself it was coincidence, that I just happened to finish shopping at the same time, happened to push my cart out the door behind him, happened to notice he parked on the far side of the lot, like he didn't want to be seen. But my heart knew better. He was halfway into his truck when he saw me. A small flicker of surprise crossed his face, quickly softened by something warm, almost cautious. He leaned against the open door, arms folded like he was bracing for something. "Hey," I said, suddenly unsure of my voice. "I got your note." He nodded once. I figured. There was a silence between us, not awkward, not heavy, just full of things we weren't sure we should say. I walked a little closer, the wheels of my cart creaking across the asphalt. "I haven't stopped thinking about what you said." I wasn't sure if it was bravery or desperation that made the words come out, but once they did, I didn't want to take them back. His jaw tensed slightly. "I didn't mean to make things harder for you." "You didn't," I said quickly. "You reminded me what it felt like to be seen, to be remembered." I looked down at my shoes, and maybe that's exactly what I needed. Adam stepped away from his truck then, closing the gap between us, until I could smell the faint scent of cedarwood and coffee clinging to his shirt. "You deserve more than being remembered once a year," he said quietly. "You deserve someone who can't forget you, even if they try." My throat tightened. I looked up at him, eyes searching his face for any sign that he might be saying these things just to say them. But all I saw was sincerity, longing, and restraint. "I think about it a lot," he added, voice rough now, "how things could have been if I'd spoken up back then, before he met you." That confession hit like a gentle storm, warm rain on the edge of something dangerous. "You liked me," I whispered. He gave a breathless half-laugh. "Lena, I loved you, but you were already looking at him like he hung the stars. And I couldn't compete with that." I didn't know what to say. I was married. I am married. But everything about this moment felt more honest than any anniversary card my husband never wrote. "I'm not asking for anything," Adam said, stepping back with visible effort. "I just needed you to know, in case you ever decide you deserve more than being forgotten." Then he left just like that, drove away. But he didn't take the hope with him. He left it blooming in my chest, soft, unfamiliar, alive. And that night I didn't sleep, because I wasn't just a wife anymore. I was a woman with a choice, and my heart had just remembered what it felt like to beat for someone who remembered me. I avoided mirrors the next morning, not because of how I looked, but because I didn't want to see the truth on my own face. The blush in my cheeks that didn't come from my husband's hands, the flicker in my eyes that had nothing to do with love, and everything to do with Adam. I made breakfast like I always did. Scrambled eggs, toast, 2 mugs of coffee. My husband barely looked up from his phone. He mumbled something about work being hectic this week, and that he might be out late again. I nodded, pretending not to notice how he didn't see the flowers wilting slightly on the counter. The ones Adam had brought, the only anniversary gift in the house. He didn't ask who they were from. He probably assumed they were from a friend, or worse, a pity purchase I made for myself. That stung. After he left, I stood in the quiet kitchen, the only sound the ticking of the clock, and the distant hum of a lawn mower outside. My phone buzzed on the table. One message, from an unsaved number. "I'm sorry if I made things harder. Just tell me you're okay." I stared at the screen for a full minute. My fingers hovered above the keys before I finally typed. "I'm not okay, but I'm starting to want to be." I didn't send it. I saved it in my drafts. But just writing, it felt like exhaling after holding my breath for too many years. That afternoon, I walked to the park near our old high school. I don't know why. Maybe because I needed fresh air. Maybe because I needed to remember who I was before I became someone's forgotten wife. I sat on the same bench I used to wait at when my husband and I were dating. Back then, he'd bring me wildflowers, whisper promises, make me laugh so hard I forgot what it felt like to doubt. Now he didn't even ask how my day was. I was lost in thought when someone sat beside me. I didn't have to look up. I felt it in my chest. "Adam." He didn't say anything at first. Just sat quietly, close but not too close, like he knew I was still balancing between 2 lives. "I didn't follow you," he said after a minute. "I just hoped you'd be here." I nodded. I believed him. We sat like that for a while, watching a group of kids chase bubbles in the breeze. And then he turned to me and asked the one question that undid everything I'd been holding together. "Lena, are you happy?" Not "are you okay?" Not "how's your marriage?" Just that one, simple, terrifying question. I couldn't lie, not to him. "No," I whispered, "I'm not." The silence after was heavy, full of choices and consequences and what-ifs. Then he leaned in, just enough for his voice to brush against my skin like a secret. "Then maybe you deserve a chance to be." And before I could reply, he stood, gave me the softest smile I'd ever seen, and walked away again. But this time, he left something behind that I didn't expect. A reason to come back. The wind picked up after Adam left, brushing strands of hair across my face like nature itself was nudging me awake. I stayed on that bench long after he was gone, my body still, but my heart racing like I'd just outrun a storm. For so long, I'd been afraid to admit what I knew deep down, that I wasn't just lonely in my marriage. I was invisible in it. That night, I waited up for my husband. I left the lights on. I even lit a candle on the dinner table, not because I believed he'd notice, but because I needed to see the truth play out in front of me. And like always, he came home late. Shirt wrinkled, no explanation. He kissed the top of my head absent-mindedly, like someone might pat their dog on the way to the couch. "Rough day," he muttered. "I'm wiped." And just like that, he was asleep. Not one word about our missed anniversary. Not a second glance at the flowers, now browning at the edges. Not a single question about how I was. I sat in the silence, across from his untouched plate of food, and whispered to myself what I couldn't say to him out loud. I can't keep doing this. The next day, I woke up to rain tapping softly against the window. My heart felt both heavy and lighter at once. Like I was carrying a secret I didn't want to let go of, but also finally beginning to understand. I reached for my phone. This time, I didn't hesitate. I opened the draft, and I hit send. I'm not okay, but I'm starting to want to be. Within seconds, the typing bubbles appeared, then vanished, then reappeared. "Then let me help you remember how." 5 minutes later, he sent another message. "Come to the bookstore, the one by the lake. The place you said you loved in college. I'll be there, no pressure, just you and me. No promises, no regrets." I almost didn't go. I stared at my car keys for what felt like hours. But then I looked around at the quiet house, the one that had once held so many dreams, and I realized I was the only one still fighting for them. The rain had slowed by the time I reached the bookstore. It was warm inside, smelled like old pages and fresh coffee. There weren't many people, just a quiet hum of jazz playing through the speakers. And then I saw him, sitting by the window, a single book open in front of him, but he wasn't reading. He was watching the door, waiting for me. When our eyes met, he stood, not rushed, not dramatic, just certain, like he'd always known I would come. He didn't reach for me, didn't say anything. He just let the moment breathe. And then, softly, he whispered, "Lena, I don't want to be the one who reminds you of what's missing. I want to be the one who makes you feel found." And for the first time in years, I let someone hold my hand. Not because I was falling apart, but because I was finally ready to rebuild. His hand wrapped around mine like it had always belonged there. Not rushed, not forced, just right. I didn't pull away. I didn't need to. We sat by the window in that little bookstore cafe, watching raindrops glide down the glass like they were tracing the lines we were too afraid to cross. But something about the silence between us felt different now. It wasn't uncertain, it was charged, like the air right before lightning. He slid the book toward me, a worn copy of The Time Traveler's Wife. I remembered telling him once, years ago, that it was my favorite. "You remembered," I said, my voice a mix of surprise and something deeper. Maybe sadness, maybe awe. "I remember everything about you." Adam said, "You always thought no one was listening, but I was." That single sentence made my breath hitch. It wasn't about the book, it was the knowing, the seeing, the way he looked at me, like he was trying to memorize every version of my soul. "I don't want to be someone's escape," I said, barely above a whisper. "You're not," he replied gently. "You're the reason I stayed." And just like that, the wall I had so carefully built between us cracked. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, eyes locked on mine. "Tell me what you want, Lena." He said, "Not what's right, not what you're expected to do, not what you're scared of, just you. What do you want?" I stared at him, heart pounding. I thought of the empty anniversaries, the one-sided love, the smiles I faked, the tears I dried before anyone could see. And then I thought of this moment, 2 hands, one truth, and a man who remembered my favorite flowers, when even my husband didn't know what color my eyes were when I cried. So I said it, slowly, truthfully. "I want to feel like I matter again. I want to wake up and not dread the silence. I want to laugh without feeling guilty. I want someone to look at me the way you do, like I'm not invisible." His eyes never left mine. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His thumb brushed over my knuckles, a gesture so gentle it almost undid me. "Then let's start with coffee," he said, smiling, "one honest moment at a time." And I knew what he meant. No pressure, no promises, just truth, and the kind of love that doesn't forget. But life doesn't pause just because your heart wakes up. And what I didn't know was that someone else had been watching, someone who was never supposed to know about that bookstore moment. someone who had never truly seen me. Until now. The knock came that evening. I was back home, towel in hand, drying the last of the dishes when I heard it, sharp, deliberate, the kind of knock that doesn't belong to a stranger. I opened the door and there he was. My husband, not tired, not distracted, not scrolling on his phone, just looking at me, for the first time in a long time. He held up his hand. A single object rested in his palm. The note, Adam's note. "I found this," he said, his voice low and unreadable. "On the counter, under the flowers I didn't ask about. Guess I should've." I stayed silent, my throat tightened. He looked at me, then past me, into the quiet house that had stopped being a home a long time ago. "Is there something going on?" he asked. And for once, I didn't lie. I didn't scramble to cover what was broken with cheap glue made of guilt. "There's nothing physical," I said quietly. "But something's happening. Yeah, something real." His jaw tensed, he looked down, shook his head, then looked back up, eyes rimmed with a regret that came too late. "I forgot again," he said, barely audible. "Our anniversary. I've been so caught up in work and—" "No," I said, "you forgot me, not just a date me." The silence that followed felt like a door quietly closing. "I'm not blaming you for everything." I continued. I let it go on. I smiled through it, I made excuses. "But I'm done trying to fix something you don't even see as broken." He stepped back like my words pushed him. "Are you leaving me for him?" he asked. I shook my head. "No, I'm leaving because I need me back. Because I deserve more than being someone's afterthought." I didn't slam the door. I closed it gently. Weeks passed. The house felt lighter without the weight of pretending. I slept in the middle of the bed. I danced barefoot in the kitchen again. I remembered who I was before silence became a second language. And one Saturday afternoon, as golden sunlight spilled through the windows, I walked into the bookstore by the lake. He was there, Adam, sitting by the window, one chair across from him, empty, waiting, like he never doubted I'd find my way back. He looked up, smiled that quiet smile that had never asked for anything, only offered everything. I sat down. No words, just two hands finding each other again, like puzzle pieces long lost. And in that moment, I wasn't broken. I wasn't stolen. I wasn't guilty. I was home.